Good morning, Endeavour. What did you think of yesterday's extract? Whoa, this group, that explorer, I think he's got something to hide. I wonder what it could be. Anyway, today's chapter is called The Trap. Now, you mustn't be listening to this unless you have done your English task for today first, because your task is to predict what you think the trap might be. And give you reasons why. Remember looking for that high quality, detailed Year 5-6 answer. You might want to include some quotes as well. Right. We're ready. Let's go. This extract is going to be in 2 parts again because it is quite long today. 2. Get yourself comfy. Take a slurp of your drink now. And then you can really listen. Fred woke twice in the night to find his nose pressed against the bare stones and the mud of the floor, and his breath coming in gasps. His father's back was turned to him. He wouldn't look round, even though Fred screamed until his lungs were empty. "A dream," he muttered. "Dreams don't matter. Not real." But it had felt very real. Real like blood is real. He looked through the vines to the canopy above them. He squinted, trying to memorise every inch. The second he got home, he would draw this canopy for his father in full colour. His father would buy him pencils in dozens of different colour greens. Fred didn't want to risk closing his eyes again. It was a powerful relief when the sun came up and he could creep out of the stone hut into its warmth. There was a chilly lump of guilt sitting in his stomach, left over from the previous night. He'd never stolen anything in his life. He'd never even tried. He looked towards the vines, shining vivid emerald in the morning light. He thought of the look on the explorer's face. It had been more angry. It had fear in it. He'd have to apologise. The thought made Fred's stomach squirm with humiliation, but he couldn't leave the explorer thinking he was a habitual liar, thief, cheat. He wasn't sure if the man was the kind to accept apologies. It might be akin to apologising to one of the stone statues, but he had to try. He tipped up his boots, checking for scorpions. All the books he had read had been very urgent about the matter of scorpions. Fred's fingers were clumsier than usual. His upper body was quivering with nerves. The ruin looked different in the sunrise. It looked more alive. There were places where vines had covered the half-fallen remnants of walls that ran along the far end of the square. Places too where the vines had been hacked back, and he could see the marks on the stone where it had been cut from the parent rock. Fred walked slowly through the open square, staring upwards. The canopy over them was intricately constructed, woven from branches of trees that sprouted among the stone and nestled against the city walls, and from a network of vines. It was a green tablecloth for a giant, laid out atop the trees. There were holes in the green scattered everywhere, where the sun burst through in bright light, and one vast gap just above the statues where the stones shone yellow. Directly under it a single tree stood, burnt of all leaves, perhaps by the sun, Fred thought, or a very small forest fire. A tiny mouse-like creature with enormous ears was basking in the heat of the morning. It scuttled away when he came near. Fred approached the stone statues, his stomach knotting tighter with every step. They were twice as tall as he was, and so worn by rain and time that their faces were smoothed of expression. The man and the woman were identifiable only by their bodies, the panther by her tail, but still, in places he could see where the tools had been used to cut the stone. He reached out and touched the panther's paw. Only half of it remained, but he could see where her claws had been, and how her yellow stone would have glowed when she was new. The explorer, though, was nowhere to be seen. Fred was just about to turn tail and run when he heard a deep breathing ahead of him. A tree had grown through the stone floor to the left side of the statues. The explorer was asleep in the hammock woven of lianas in the shade of a tree. He lay in it, diagonally. Stretched out in that direction, it was almost as flat as a bed. Fred made a mental note to only lie in hammocks diagonally from now on. Under the hammock was a cluster of things: a small pot of ink, a quill made from a vulture feather, a piece of bark with some notes, and an enormous pair of shoes. Fred moved closer. The explorer looked much younger asleep. Softer. "Boy?" The man didn't open his eyes, at least he didn't seem to. "I hope you've got a good reason for waking me." Fred's chest grew hot. "Sorry, he began. "How do you know it was him?" He must, Fred thought, have been peeping between his eyelashes. I could smell you, said the explorer, as if Fred had asked the question aloud. And you all breathe differently. The English girl breathes through her teeth. The Brazilian girl, with the ropes of hair, breathes as though she fears waking the world, and the small boy appears to be breathing through a veritable revolutionary barricade of snot. And right now you are breathing as if you're afraid I plan to throw a knife into your kneecap. Fred flinched, but the explorer didn't seem to notice. He sighed and stretched. It's no good, I'm awake now. Oh, I hope you slept well, asked Fred. The explorer sat up and scratched his chin. This isn't a rooming house in Bournemouth. You don't have to talk like an old woman. Fred felt his forehead grow hot. I was trying to be polite. My father says be ruthlessly polite, if only because it's easier than all alternatives. How practical of him. The explorer extracted a red and black bee-like insect from the hem of his trouser leg, crushed it in his palms. In future, boy, it's best not to come near me when I'm sleeping. If you need to wake me, throw something from a safe distance. Why? I have a startle reflex. Fred must have looked puzzled, as puzzled as he felt, because the old man added, I was captured once. By Germans? No. By natives? Not the people you're thinking of. Not the indigenous people to whom this land belongs. By the owners of a rubber company. I didn't like how they were treating the people who lived in the forest around them. Is that how your leg... I have very little desire to talk about it. Fred stepped backwards. There are looks that make you want to hide behind your own back. He forced himself to speak. I wanted to come and say, I'm really sorry about last night. Oh, it was coming out wrong. He sounded as if he were apologising for failing to hold a door open. He swallowed. Properly sorry. The explorer raised a single, unimpressed eyebrow. Fred began to stammer. Fear dug into his belly. It wasn't... We weren't to take any or break any, but it was dishonest and counterproductive, said the explorer dryly. Quite. Fred flushed. For the first time he met the explorer's eye. He nodded. Yeah, it was. I didn't mean to be those things, but it was. You're right to be angry. And he stared at the floor and turned away back towards the sleeping house. Wait. Fred turned. See you in extract 2.